The weapons demonstration hall of Zorathian Combat Academy buzzed with the kind of nervous energy that only came when Instructor Keth'rak was about to show off. The massive four-armed Zorathian stood center stage, his purple-scaled hide gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights, each of his hands gripping a different piece of what he pompously called civilized warfare technology. "Observe, cadets," Keth'rak bellowed, his voice echoing off the metal walls like a particularly obnoxious dinner gong. "This is the ZX-7 plasma decimator, capable of reducing a target to constituent atoms at 300 meters. He hefted the weapon with two arms while his other two gestured dramatically. Notice the elegant fusion of quantum targeting systems, auto-stabilizing gyroscopes, and enough raw firepower to level a small moon. The assembled cadets, a motley collection of species from across the galaxy, leaned forward with varying degrees of enthusiasm. The Centaurians took notes with their tentacles, the crystalline Vorthak hummed in harmonic appreciation, the insectoid Clixons clicked their mandibles in what passed for applause among their kind. In the back row, however, Luna Blackwood sat perfectly still. The lone human in the class maintained what her grandmother would have called proper posture, hands folded neatly in her lap, brown eyes focused on the instructor with the kind of polite attention that somehow managed to be more insulting than outright boredom. "Now then," Keth'rak continued, warming up to his favorite topic, "let us contrast this marvel of engineering with the laughably primitive weapons still employed by certain, less advanced civilizations." His four eyes swiveled toward Luna with the subtlety of a freight train collision. "Perhaps our human representative would care to enlighten us about Earth's continued reliance on pointed sticks and twisted plant fibers." A ripple of snickers went through the class. The Centaurian next to Luna actually covered his beak with a tentacle to muffle his chittering. Even the normally stoic Vorthak produced what could generously be called a crystalline chuckle. Luna cleared her throat softly. "You mean archery, sir?" "Archery." Keth'rak threw back his massive head and laughed, a sound like rocks tumbling down a mountainside. "Yes, that quaint little hobby. Tell me, Cadet Blackwood, in an age of directed energy weapons, force shields, and quantum disruptors, why in the name of the seven suns do humans still play with wooden toys?" "Well, sir," Luna began, her voice carrying the kind of calm that made smart people nervous, "my grandfather always said that the best weapon is the one that works when everything else fails." "Your grandfather?" Keth'rak slapped his knee with enough force to dent armor plating. Was he perhaps a museum curator? A historical reenactor? Someone who forgot what century he was living in? "He was a soldier, sir. Special operations." The laughter died down slightly, but Keth'rak was on a roll. Special operations, using a bow and arrow. What did he do? Sneak up on enemy starships and poke holes in their hulls? More snickers from the class. The Clixon actually fell off his perch laughing, which sounded like a bag of coins hitting concrete. Luna's expression never changed. He served in the Colonial Defense Forces during the Outer Rim conflicts. 43 confirmed kills, sir. All with traditional archery equipment. 43. Keth'rak's voice rose to a pitch that probably violated several noise ordinances. "My dear primitive child, this little plasma rifle has a confirmed kill count in the thousands. And that's just from last week's training exercises." "Yes, sir. Very impressive." Something in Luna's tone made Keth'rak pause. It was the kind of politeness that felt like being patted on the head by someone who could crush your skull without breaking stride. "You don't sound convinced, Cadet Blackwood." "Not my place to be convinced or unconvinced, sir. You're the instructor." "Indeed I am." Keth'rak puffed up like a balloon at a birthday party. "Which is why I'm going to make you a little proposition. Since you seem so attached to your grandfather's antique methods, why don't you bring this legendary bow of his to tomorrow's practical examination? We'll have ourselves a little demonstration of primitive versus advanced." The class erupted in excited chatter. Betting pools formed instantly. The Centaurians started calculating odds. The Clixons began discussing the best viewing angles for the inevitable carnage. Luna simply nodded. "If that's what you'd like, sir." "Oh, it's exactly what I'd like." Keth'rak's four arms spread wide in theatrical grandeur. Class dismissed. "Tomorrow we'll all learn the difference between a museum piece and a real weapon." As the cadets filed out, chattering excitedly about tomorrow's entertainment, Luna remained seated for a moment longer. She pulled out a small holopad and scrolled to a message from her family. At the bottom was a photo of her grandfather standing beside what looked like a work of art masquerading as a weapon. She smiled for the first time all day. "Oh, grandfather," she whispered. "They have no idea what they're in for." By the time Luna arrived at the Academy arena the next morning, word had spread faster than a supernova shockwave through the entire facility. What had started as a simple weapons demonstration had somehow transformed into the most anticipated event since Commander Zixtal accidentally blew up the cafeteria trying to heat his lunch with a plasma torch. The arena itself buzzed with activity that would have made a Centaurian hive look peaceful. Cadets from every species imaginable had crammed into the viewing galleries, their excited chatter creating a symphony of clicks, chirps, warbles, and at least 3 sounds that probably violated several physics laws. Holographic betting displays flickered throughout the crowd, showing odds that would have made a Ferengi weep with joy. Current odds, Instructor Keth'rak, 2-1 favorite, announced a mechanical voice over the intercom. Human primitive weapon technology, 57-1 against. Place your bets now. Sentient beings. Luna watched a group of Clixons excitedly waving credit chips while chittering about easy money and primitive Earth Monkey. She made a mental note to remember their faces for later. Down on the arena floor, Keth'rak had transformed the space into what could only be described as a weapons enthusiast's fever dream. Holographic displays showed detailed schematics of his ZX-7 plasma decimator. Floating screens listed its technical specifications in 17 different languages. A small army of maintenance drones buzzed around his position, checking power cells and calibrating targeting systems. "Ah, Cadet Blackwood." Keth'rak's voice boomed across the arena as Luna descended the steps to the floor level. "I was beginning to wonder if you'd reconsidered this little demonstration." "Wouldn't miss it for the universe, sir," Luna replied, hefting a long, wrapped bundle in her arms. The crowd fell silent as she set the bundle down and began unwrapping it with the careful precision of someone handling religious artifacts. What emerged made several aliens actually gasp audibly. The longbow was beautiful. That was the only word for it. Nearly 6 feet of what looked like polished wood, but wood that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. The grain flowed like water frozen in time, and the string appeared to be made from some material that caught and reflected light in ways that shouldn't have been possible with simple organic compounds. "That's it?" called out a Vorthak from the viewing gallery. "It looks like a tree branch with dental floss." "Where are the targeting computers?" demanded a Centaurian. "The power source? The ammunition magazine?" Luna ran her fingers along the bow's length, checking for invisible flaws with the kind of practiced ease that comes from years of repetition. She plucked the string once, and the resulting note hung in the air like a tuning fork made of pure music. "No power source needed," she said conversationally, pulling an arrow from her quiver and examining its point. "No targeting computer required. No ammunition limit, except what you can carry." She looked up at Keth'rak with that same polite smile that was becoming his personal nightmare. "Simple, reliable, effective." "Simple," Keth'rak laughed, but it sounded a little forced now. "Well, let's see how simple holds up against sophisticated." He gestured grandly toward the far end of the arena where a series of targets had materialized. "Standard combat scenarios, progressively more challenging. We'll start with basic stationary targets at 50 meters. The first target appeared, a metal disc about the size of a dinner plate, hovering motionless in the air. Keth'rak raised his plasma rifle and immediately a cascade of holographic displays sprang to life around him. Targeting reticles, wind speed calculations, gravitational adjustment algorithms, and enough technical readouts to stock a small library. After 3 full seconds of computer analysis, he fired. The plasma bolt struck the target dead center, leaving nothing but superheated vapor and the lingering smell of ozone. "Boom!" shouted a Clixon from the stands. "Vaporized. Let's see the stick do that." Luna had already knocked her arrow. Without any visible aiming process, certainly without any holographic assistance, she drew the string back to her cheek and released. The arrow struck the center of where the target had been, embedding itself in the arena wall behind with a solid thunk. "Both targets eliminated," announced the arena's automated scoring system in a voice that managed to sound disappointed. "No clear advantage established." "Moving targets," Keth'rak declared, clearly expecting this to end things quickly. "Computer, activate rapid movement protocol." 3 new targets appeared, zipping through the air in erratic patterns that would have challenged a fighter pilot. Keth'rak's targeting computer went into overdrive, displays flickering as it tried to calculate intercept courses for objects that seemed determined to violate several laws of physics. His first shot missed by a good 3 meters. The second went wide by even more. The targeting computer was apparently having what could charitably be called a nervous breakdown, trying to predict the movements of targets that changed direction every half-second. "Come on, you technological marvel," he muttered, smacking the side of his rifle. "Calculate faster." Meanwhile, Luna had gone very still. Her eyes tracked the moving targets with the kind of focused intensity that predators usually reserved for particularly tasty prey. She drew back her first arrow, led the target by what seemed like pure instinct, and released. The arrow caught the first target perfectly, sending it spinning to the ground. Before the crowd could react, she had knocked and fired again. The second target joined the first. The third arrow was already in the air before the second target hit the ground. 3 targets eliminated, the scoring system announced with what might have been surprise if computers could feel such things. Time elapsed, 4.7 seconds. The arena had gone completely silent except for the whirring of Keth'rak's targeting computer, which was still trying to figure out where the targets had gone. Up in the viewing gallery, a Centaurian slowly lowered his betting slip. Did the primitive weapon just outperform the advanced technology? "The targeting computer must be malfunctioning," declared a Vorthak, though its crystalline voice carried less certainty than before. Keth'rak stared at his plasma rifle as if it had personally betrayed him. Several of his maintenance drones buzzed around frantically, running diagnostics that kept coming back with the deeply unhelpful result of all systems functioning normally. "Fluke," he announced to the crowd. "Obviously a fluke. The real test comes with armored targets." But as he spoke, his 4 eyes kept drifting to Luna, who was calmly retrieving her arrows from the arena wall. She moved with the kind of quiet confidence that suggested she was just getting warmed up. In the viewing gallery, the betting displays flickered. The odds were starting to shift. Keth'rak's confidence was beginning to develop hairline cracks, like expensive armor hit by something it wasn't designed to handle. He gestured aggressively at the arena's control panel, his 4 arms working frantically to input new parameters. "Combat Scenario 7, he announced, his voice carrying just a hint of the desperation that comes when the universe stops behaving according to plan. "Multiple targets, obstacles, time pressure. Let's see how your stick handles real battlefield conditions." The arena transformed around them. Holographic barriers materialized, creating a maze of cover points and blind corners. 20 targets appeared simultaneously, some stationary, others moving, a few actually shooting back with harmless but annoying light beams. A timer appeared in the air above them. 60 seconds. "This is more like it," Keth'rak muttered, raising his plasma rifle. The targeting computer kicked into overdrive, trying to process 20 different threat assessments while calculating optimal firing positions through the obstacle course. "Begin," the arena announced. Keth'rak opened fire immediately, his plasma rifle cycling through its rapid fire mode. Brilliant bolts of energy lit up the arena like a small star going supernova. His targeting computer was working so hard that cooling fans actually sprouted from the weapon's sides, whirring frantically to prevent a meltdown. The first few shots connected beautifully. Targets exploded in showers of sparks and holographic debris, but as Keth'rak continued firing, something troubling began to happen. Warning lights appeared on his weapon's display. The word "overheating" began flashing in increasingly urgent shades of red. Meanwhile, Luna had vanished. Not literally, of course, but she moved through the obstacle course like smoke given form. Her bow made no sound except for the whisper of the string and the soft thunk of arrows finding their marks. No bright plasma bolts announced her position to every enemy in the sector. No targeting computers screamed for attention or demanded power from overtaxed systems. She simply appeared, shot, and melted back into cover before anyone could track her movement. "Where is she?" Keth'rak spun around, his targeting computer frantically scanning for heat signatures, movement patterns, anything that would help him locate his opponent. "Computer, where is the human?" Unable to establish target lock, his weapon responded in a voice that managed to sound apologetic. "No energy signature detected. No electronic emissions registered. Target appears to be invisible to sensors." "She can't be invisible," Keth'rak protested. She's right there. He pointed in a direction where Luna definitely wasn't, his plasma rifle's sensors still coming up empty. From somewhere in the maze came the soft whistle of another arrow, followed by the crash of another target being eliminated. 15 targets remaining, the arena announced helpfully. In the viewing gallery, the aliens were beginning to lean forward with genuine interest rather than anticipated entertainment. A group of Centaurians had stopped making jokes and started taking notes. Several Verthak were harmonizing in what sounded suspiciously like appreciation. "Look at that," whispered a Clixon to his neighbor. "No power consumption readouts, no ammunition counters, no system maintenance requirements. And she's reusing the projectiles," observed a Centaurian, watching Luna smoothly extract arrows from fallen targets as she moved past them. The same ammunition, over and over, no supply lines needed. Keth'rak's plasma rifle chose that moment to prove the alien's point by emitting a warning beep that sounded like a dying electronic animal. "Critical overheat warning," the weapon announced in the kind of voice usually reserved for impending reactor meltdowns. "Mandatory. Cooling cycle required. Weapon offline for 90 seconds. 90 seconds? Keth'rak stared at his rifle in horror. In the middle of combat? What kind of warrior has to stop fighting to let his weapon take a nap? The kind who depends on technology instead of skill, Luna thought but didn't say. She was too busy systematically eliminating the remaining targets with the methodical precision of someone who had been doing this since before she could properly tie her shoes. 10 targets remaining. 5 targets remaining. Combat scenario complete. Time elapsed 37 seconds. All targets eliminated by Cadet Blackwood. The arena fell silent except for the gentle whirring of Keth'rak's rifle fans and what sounded suspiciously like muffled applause from the viewing gallery. "Impossible." Keth'rak's voice cracked slightly. "The computer must be malfunctioning. Run a diagnostic." "All systems functioning normally," the arena replied with the patience of a machine talking to someone having a small breakdown. "Combat performance assessment. Human archery technology demonstrated superior stealth characteristics, unlimited operational endurance, 0 electronic signature and complete immunity to electronic countermeasures." Electronic countermeasures. Keth'rak seized on this like a drowning man grabbing floating debris. "That's it. Computer. Activate electromagnetic pulse field. Let's see how primitive technology handles advanced electronic warfare." "Sir," Luna said gently, retrieving her arrows with unhurried efficiency. "Electromagnetic pulses affect electronic devices. This is a piece of wood with a string." The EMP field activated anyway, filling the arena with the kind of electromagnetic chaos that would have fried every electronic device within a kilometer. Keth'rak's plasma rifle immediately shut down completely, its displays going dark as protective circuits kicked in. Luna tested her bowstring. It twanged musically, completely unaffected by electromagnetic interference that would have reduced a starship's computer core to expensive paperweights. "Would you like to continue?" she asked politely. Up in the viewing gallery, the betting displays were flickering wildly as odds shifted faster than quantum particles in a probability storm. Aliens who had been laughing about primitive Earth technology were now frantically recalculating their positions. "I'll take some of that action on the human," a Vorthak announced, its crystalline voice ringing with newfound respect. "Make that 2 of us," added a Centaurian, tentacles working rapidly at a betting console. Keth'rak heard the murmur of changing allegiances and felt something that might have been panic if instructors were allowed to feel such things. He frantically input new parameters into the arena's control system. "Environmental challenges," he declared with the desperation of someone playing their last card. "Extreme temperature variations, low light conditions, atmospheric interference." "Sir," Luna said, checking her arrow points with the care of someone who had learned that details matter. "My grandfather used this bow in vacuum, underwater, in Arctic blizzards, and during solar flares. What exactly are you planning to throw at it that's worse than combat in the Outer Rim?" Keth'rak's forearms sagged slightly. For the first time since the demonstration began, he was starting to suspect that he might have made a tiny, insignificant, completely inconsequential error in judgment. The kind of error that ends careers. Desperation, Luna had learned from her grandfather, makes even intelligent people do spectacularly stupid things. Keth'rak was about to prove this theorem in ways that would be discussed in Academy legend for generations to come. "Final challenge," he announced. his voice carrying the kind of manic energy that usually preceded either brilliant victories or catastrophic defeats. Ultimate precision test. A shot that no primitive weapon could possibly make. The arena reconfigured itself one last time, creating what could only be described as an engineering student's nightmare. Barriers appeared at seemingly random angles, creating a maze of deflection surfaces, narrow gaps, and impossible sight lines. At the very end of this labyrinth, barely visible through the geometric chaos, hung a target no larger than a coin. There, Keth'rak pointed with all 4 arms simultaneously. Target acquisition through multiple barriers around 17 corners, through gaps measured in millimeters. My plasma rifle's computer-guided targeting system will calculate the precise ricochet angles needed to. Sir, Luna interrupted gently. Your plasma rifle is still offline from the electromagnetic pulse. Keth'rak looked down at his weapon. Its displays remained stubbornly dark, and no amount of percussive maintenance seemed likely to change that situation. Right, he said weakly. Well, the principle stands. No one could make that shot. It's mathematically impossible without computer assistance. Luna studied the course with the kind of intense focus that made smart people uncomfortable. She moved slowly along the firing line, examining angles, measuring distances with her eyes, and doing calculations that apparently required no external assistance whatsoever. You know, she said conversationally, my grandfather once told me about a shot he had to make during the siege of Kepler Station. Enemy commander holed up in a bunker 3 levels down, behind blast doors that couldn't be breached. Only way to reach him was through ventilation shafts, around support beams, and through a gap smaller than the width of an arrow. Impossible, Keth'rak muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. That's what the other soldiers said. Luna knocked an arrow, her movements carrying the fluid precision of decades of practice. Grandfather spent 2 hours studying the angles. When they asked him what he was doing, he said something I've never forgotten. She drew the bowstring back to her cheek, her entire body settling into perfect alignment. He said, technology fails when you need it most. But physics. Luna's voice carried the absolute certainty of someone quoting gospel. Physics is forever. She released the arrow. What happened next violated several laws that the aliens thought they understood about projectile motion. The arrow struck the first barrier at an angle that seemed random until it ricocheted perfectly toward the second surface. From there it careened through the maze like a guided missile made of wood and feathers, bouncing off surfaces with mathematical precision that would have made a quantum computer weep with envy. The arrow threaded through gaps that seemed too small for anything larger than light beams. It curved around obstacles by using deflection surfaces that Luna had somehow spotted from 60 meters away. It navigated the labyrinth like it had been born knowing the way. And at the end of its impossible journey, it struck the tiny target dead center with a sound like destiny arriving right on schedule. The Academy arena fell into the kind of silence usually reserved for religious experiences or natural disasters. Even the air recycling systems seemed to hold their breath. Keth'rak's 4 arms hung at his sides like broken machinery. His mouth opened and closed several times, producing no sound except what might have been the gentle wheezing of a worldview collapsing. Did she just... A Centaurian whispered from the viewing gallery. Calculate 17 ricochet angles in her head, finished a Vorthak, its crystalline voice cracking slightly, and execute them perfectly, with a piece of wood. In the sudden quiet, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed like thunder. The Academy's senior instructors had arrived, drawn by reports of something unprecedented happening in Arena 7. They took in the scene with the kind of professional assessment that comes from decades of military experience. Commander Thalx, a grizzled Zentarian veteran whose cybernetic eye had seen more battles than most species had fought, studied the ricochet pattern for a long moment. Instructor Keth'rak, he said finally, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Would you care to explain why our sensors are showing a projectile path that our computers classify as ballistically impossible? Keth'rak's voice, when it finally emerged, sounded like someone trying to speak while drowning. She. The primitive weapon. It shouldn't. Commander Thales turned to Luna, who was calmly retrieving her arrow from the target. Cadet Blackwood, your grandfather's name and service record, if you please. Master Sergeant Thomas Blackwood, sir. Earth Colonial Defense Forces, Special Operations Division. 43 confirmed kills, all with traditional archery equipment. Nicknamed the Ghost. because enemy forces never heard him coming. The ghost, Commander Thales repeated, and something like respect entered his voice. I've read the reports, never believed them until now. He looked around the arena, taking in the impossible ricochet course, the smoking remains of Keth'rak's technological superiority, and the absolute silence of hundreds of alien cadets who had just watched their assumptions about primitive and advanced warfare get turned inside out. Class dismissed, he announced. All of you, go think about what you've learned today. All of you think of what you've learned today. As the aliens filed out in stunned silence, Keth'rak remained frozen in place, staring at his offline plasma rifle like it had personally betrayed him. Which in a way it had. 3 hours later, after the arena had emptied and the betting pools had been settled with much grumbling from various alien species, Keth'rak found himself alone with Luna and her grandfather's bow, his plasma rifle set forgotten on a nearby bench, its displays still dark and somehow accusatory. Cadet Blackwood, he began, his voice carrying none of its earlier bombast. I owe you an apology, a significant one. Luna looked up from cleaning her arrows with the methodical care of someone who understood that maintenance was the difference between life and death. No need, sir. You learned something today. That's what education is for. May I? Keth'rak hesitated, his 4 hands hovering uncertainly. May I examine your bow? I find myself curious about its construction. Luna handed it over with the casual trust of someone secure in her abilities. Keth'rak held the weapon with the reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts, turning it over in his hands and marveling at its elegant simplicity. No power source, he murmured. No targeting computer, no ammunition counter, no maintenance requirements beyond basic care. He looked up at Luna with something approaching awe. How is it possible that something so simple can outperform technology that took centuries to develop? Advancement isn't always about adding complexity, Luna replied, settling into the patient tone of someone who had thought deeply about such things. Sometimes it's about perfecting simplicity. My grandfather used to say that the most sophisticated tool is the one that never breaks when you need it most. Your grandfather was a wise man. He was, and he understood that mastery of simple tools often surpasses fancy technology operated by people who don't truly understand it. 6 months later, the Academy's combat curriculum had undergone what historians would call a fundamental restructuring. Traditional weapons from dozens of species were now taught alongside energy weapons and quantum disruptors. Luna had been promoted to assistant instructor of classical combat techniques, a position that hadn't existed until the day she made 17 impossible ricochet shots look routine. The most surprising change, however, was Instructor Keth'rak's new hobby. Every evening after regular classes ended, he could be found in Training Bay 7 with a simple wooden bow, struggling to hit targets that Luna could strike blindfolded. His progress was measured in months rather than minutes, and his respect for the human art of archery grew with every missed shot. Harder than it looks, he admitted one evening, rubbing his sore shoulder after a particularly frustrating practice session. Most worthwhile things are, Luna replied. Today, visitors to the Academy's Museum of Military Excellence can see Luna's grandfather's bow displayed in a place of honor, mounted beneath a simple brass plaque that reads, "In memory of weapons that never fail those who truly understand them." Donated by Master Sergeant Thomas Blackwood, Earth Colonial Defense Forces. Some technologies are timeless. Below it, in smaller text that makes aliens stop and think, a second inscription: complexity is not advancement, mastery is. Keth'rak had insisted on that addition. After all, he had learned something important that day about the difference between sophisticated technology and sophisticated understanding. The bow taught patience, precision, and the kind of deep knowledge that no computer could provide. And every time a cadet asked why they needed to learn primitive weapons when advanced technology existed, instructors would simply point to the bow and smile. Some lessons they learned were best taught by example,